This moment is extra special because we celebrate a significant milestone for the Department of Design at IIT Hyderabad. This year we proudly mark a decade since the launch of our first Masters of Design program in 2014 and 5 years since the launch of BDS program in 2019. And over the years our department has grown tremendously, not just in numbers but also in ambition and talent. And this growth has also reflected in the building that we have now made home to. And to officially open today's proceedings, I'd like to invite our distinguished speaker, Dr. Benny, and some of our staff members and our student representatives to come and light the lamp. Moving on to today's highlight, we are privileged to host a talk by an individual whose work and ideas resonate deeply with the ethos of sustainable and context-driven design. The talk, titled Sustainable Vernacularism, The Way Forward, addresses one of the most pressing concerns of our time, climate change and global warming. Dr. Benny Kuriakose argues for a fundamental shift in our thinking and actions, emphasizing the critical importance of sustainable practices rooted in vernacular architecture. He highlights how India's indigenous building traditions offer valuable lessons and why blindly imitating Western styles might not be the solution we need. Let me introduce the man behind these compelling ideas. Dr. Benny Kuriakose is the founder of Benny Kuriakose and Associates, an architectural and conservation consultancy firm established in 1991. He began his career in 1984 under the mentorship of renowned architect Laurie Baker. In 1986, he was awarded the Charles Wallace India Trust Award, which enabled him to pursue an MA in Conservation Studies from the University of York. After traveling extensively in Europe, he returned to Kerala to follow his passion for architecture. Over his illustrious career, he has received numerous accolades, including the Inside Outside Designer of the Year Award and the Celebration of Architecture Award 2012. In 2015, he earned a doctorate from IIT Madras, focusing on his research interests in mass housing. He is the author of Conserving Timber Structures in India and a co-editor of guidelines for the preparation of a heritage management plan. He has consulted for UNESCO, UNDP, various other state governments and other organizations as well. Sir's design philosophy, rooted in sustainable architecture, emphasizes adaptive reuse and heritage conservation as tools for achieving sustainability while preserving cultural and historical significance. A strong critic of superficial certifications, he advocates for meaningful, context-driven, sustainable practices in architecture. We are honored to have him with us today for this session. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Benny.
Okay, thanks. I would like to thank IIT Hyderabad for giving me an opportunity to give a talk. First time I'm in IIT Hyderabad, and today I'm just going to not going to talk about my projects as such, which is what you might be expecting. Today what I'm planning to talk, or what I'm given in the presentation, is when I relook at my practice, what distinguishes my practice from the rest. Also, how relevant is it in the present times? So, you can ask questions at the end or in between. I'm quite okay to, if you raise your hands, I don't mind asking. The idea is to put forward a thought process which I have gone through. At the beginning of my career, mostly at your age, I did not know any answers at that time. But over the years, I think I found some answers. So I'm just sharing those answers. And if those answers will tell you what my practice is. So this is, so all the photographs, I mean, most of the photographs, unless I illustrate it to put a particular point, is that of my buildings. But I'm not going to talk about the projects or buildings today. You know, the global warming is around the corner. Our planet is very fragile. I don't have to tell you, might have listened to it hundreds of times. What happened in Vijayawada in 73 centimeters of rain in 24 hours. Now the politicians have, and everybody has found a nice word for it. Cloudburst, what can we do? Is it true? I've been working or following this stream for almost 40 years because I worked with Laurie Baker, who was my mentor. I mean, at that time, the word sustainability was not there. But now people talk about sustainability, people talk about him. I never thought I'll be living to see these issues. I thought my children also might not see those things. It will be only my grandchildren who will have to see these things. But now I know, if I live for, already I'm seeing it, if I live for at least another, by average Indian statistics, I should live for another 12 years, life expectancy. But you are going to see through it. This is an emergency situation. Floods in Bangalore, floods in Kerala, floods in Chennai. There is no time, it comes at very odd times. It's not only this emergency, climate change, we have to look at the deterioration which is happening in the field. This is also something which we have to address. The difference between architecture and other arts is one major difference. If somebody does a painting or something, or a sculpture, people can decide not to see those. But when it comes to architecture, you are forced to see them because it's part of the public thing. So the designers and architects have a responsibility to the society that what they do should follow certain norms. They should not be doing something which is damaging to the ecology or the environment, because this is a public thing. I mean, I won't say I'm a critic of modern architecture, M with a capital. I mean, very clearly. I've enjoyed some of the buildings which has come in the modern architecture era. I love them. If I select 10 buildings which I like the most in the world, 4 or 5 might be the buildings which has come in the last 100 years as part of the modern architecture. As one who has tried to follow Le Corbusier, I've seen some of his buildings. What has happened, I mean, he said in 1920s that we should build office blocks of 50 stories high. Residential blocks should be 15 stories. And what you see, the kind of development in some of the outskirts is nothing but that. 15-storied or 20-storied apartment. Even when I was coming from the airport today, I saw nowhere in the middle you are seeing this 20-storied buildings or which is happening in. I mean, I go to IIT Roorkee to give some talks or lectures. That guy drive from Delhi airport to Roorkee, and on the way in Ghaziabad, I can tell you, in another few years, it will be urban slums, vertical slums. The way the buildings have been developed. where the people failed to look at. Corbusier in 1920s said very clearly that 85% should be forest and only 15% should be built up. But what was followed was 85% was built up and 15% open spaces. He has said very clearly, people need open spaces, people need greenery. But Corbusier's vision in the 1920s was manipulated or done, interpreted in a wrong way. And that is what you see in the present day architecture, unfortunately. I won't say everything, and this is very, very important. The modern movement could have developed in a very, very positive direction, but unfortunately, it degenerated into a style which is very superficial. The principles of much of the modern architecture was not. Didn't happen, was diluted very much in this. What I will say, the modern architecture, the social content of architecture completely got drained away. The people were the last. The human content of architecture got drained away in these moments. You don't see people. You don't give importance to people. And that is what has happened. I mean, today I'm going to talk about architecture, but many of these things are equally applicable in the relative design fields as well. So the human content or the social content which has drained away has created a problem which is there now, which has happened. Normally I said the failure of modern architecture. Let me tell you how it failed. You will know all these things, but to understand the questions which I am raising and the answers which I am putting forward, you need to know this background. I will say it is a technological failure. The air conditioning, and Corbusier's writing clearly showed 1920s. He has said that we can go up, we have a technology, concrete, which we can build 50 stories high. We don't have to build according to the local climate, because we have a technology, which is the air conditioning technology or the heating technology, which developed in the 20s and 30s across the world. So we have a technology to do this. So why should we design according to the climate? And we can build 50 stories, we solve the problem of the land and many of those issues, but build in 85% forest area and only 15% should be built up. But we know from the 70s and 80s, the gas which used to run these air conditioning equipments, chlorofluorocarbons, depletes the ozone layer. We knew that asbestos, when came into the market, is considered to be a wonderful building material. That is how it was described. No fire hazard, no degeneration or this thing. Even now you find asbestos sheets which have been put 60 years or 80 years, 100 years. Even in UK, you can still see buildings which are built with asbestos. They don't no more build with asbestos. Formaldehyde. It is there in our plywoods. Less than 2% is the market share of the formaldehyde-free plywood, because nobody wants formaldehyde-free plywood. And you know formaldehyde is a carcinogen. I have an oncosurgeon who is there. He said number of people with cancer is increasing so rapidly because they are exposed to these pesticides and formaldehyde, all these carcinogenic materials, pollution and everything. It's on the increase. The quality of construction has gone very far. The speed of construction has increased, but the quality of construction decreased drastically. In 1973, Architectural Review, which is one of the topmost architectural magazines, they carried an article. They found that 1/3 of the concrete buildings built in UK are leaking. Crown buildings is the government buildings. Those owned by the Crown or owned by the I mean, at that time it was Queen Elizabeth, now it is Prince Charles. 1/3 of the crown buildings were leaking. It is not the fault of concrete. It is the way concrete is used. You go to any exhibition on construction, you will find one of the major sales stalls will be the waterproofing companies selling their products, construction chemicals, which is selling this. The reason is very simple. Concrete has to expand and contract every day. The daytime temperature is 40 degrees, nighttime temperature is 30 degrees. During the daytime it is expanding, during night it has to contract. This is the coefficient of linear expansion of physics which you learned in school. So concrete is also expanding every day, expanding, contracting, expanding. And once it happens through a cycle of say 20 years, cracks will develop. It is very difficult to repair concrete. And once you know those who are living in houses with a leakage, you know the problems which is happening. There are so many issues. Technological failure has happened with the so-called modern architecture. Now let us look at the climatic failures. There was a time when you can, when they use glass, you can let in all the heat, but you can air condition. But now we know energy is, 1970s itself, energy crisis started. We don't have the energy, we don't have the resources to air condition all our buildings. So we have to think about designing buildings which uses the least amount of energy. There were many passive methods. I'm not just going into the details. Social failures. Many of the traditional communities were broken up. This is the one cartoon which is there. In the Gulf, all these complete blind adoption of the Western technology, blindly adopting the West, had destroyed their culture, destroyed their communities. And it has happened in every field. It's there. We buy an Innova car and adjust to the Innova car. It is supposed to be a 7 plus 1 8-seater car. But in Japan, the back seat is meant for vegetables and supermarket groceries. When it comes to India, we adapt to it. People are moved indoors. This is something. I used to play so much time outside the house, but my children have not spent that much amount of time there. Again, energy wastage. And even now the lorries are air conditioned, lorry cabins, buses and all these things. All this is taking a toll on its nature. It's difficult to go back. Cultural failure. Destroyed the cultures. Changed the habits of people. The vernacular architecture, whatever you want to call it, was completely destroyed. The new generation of engineers and architects who came out did not study about any of these materials. They studied about steel and concrete. They were taught only that, and that resulted in a problem. And it's an environmental failure too. Resources are limited. 1972, when the Limits to Growth book was released, the first UN conference on environment. Climate change was not a word at that time, global warming. 1972, UN conference on environment happened in Stockholm. The Limits to Growth was released. Report was released. The report was made by a group of professors from Harvard University, and they said there is a limits to growth. The oil reserves are limited. The aluminium reserves are limited. The iron resources are limited. Looking at a period of more than 50 years, we have a new problem which has come up, which is a waste generation as part of it. Every city has a problem treating the waste, depending on whatever these things are coming. Looking at these, when you look at these things, of course, I also studied science and technology and things. But science and technology cannot offset a poorly thought out design, which is very clear. You need to have a sensible design for carrying out these things. Or in one way, technology has failed to find a sustainable solution for many of our requirements. And as a believer in science and technology, I think it is not at all easy. I don't think anything will come in the future either. Because and it's going to affect your generation more than my generation. Very clearly. So many issues are cropping up much faster than what anybody has imagined. So, as a practice, now let me come to that. As a practice, we try to address these issues because we believe that sustainability is important. There are four aspects which our designs stand out very differently, and there are reasons for doing it. That is what I'm going to talk about, not about. One is taking inspiration from vernacular architecture. Our buildings have a strong influence by the local architecture at that time. Then the kind of buildings we do, timber is highly used. It's considered to be the most sustainable building material now because it can be reused, recycled, reproduced, all those things. So timber is a future building material. The third thing is that there's one lesser known aspect which is coming. I had to speak at a conference organized by Harvard University, so they wanted me to take this argument that repairs and maintenance is equally important when you look at sustainability. You had a phone earlier which used to throw away in 2 years. Now, the phones are lasting a little bit more. When you look at product design, you have to think about whatever you do where simple things can replace things. The thought process has to change completely. In the building also, it has to change drastically. Then conservation of buildings, which forms a substantial part of my practice because we believe in recycling the whole building, reusing the whole building. Because reuse, recycle, etc. are important things for sustainability. So we recycle the whole building, not just the components. Of course, we recycle the components also as that. Now coming back to vernacular architecture, this is a famous statement by my mentors, Laurie Baker. He was a British architect, practiced in Trivandrum, where I got trained. We should be designing as Indians for Indians in India. We have an incredibly interesting, beautiful, indigenous style of architecture. We should not destroy it. This point is very important. We should be designing as Indians for Indians in India. Many of the buildings you will see in many of the campuses, people talk about it, can be in Peru, can be in Jakarta, can be in Germany. It doesn't distinguish us. The context is not taken into account. The climate is not taken into account. And this is one important aspect. Now, I'm just talking, Corbusier is considered, he can be considered the most influential thinker, architect who influenced architecture in the 20th century. He said, talking to some of the students in 1940s, he said, our great schools would do far better to send their students to the countryside of France rather than to Rome. Because at that time, the students in French schools of architecture used to visit Rome and Greece, etc., as part of their studies. And he said, let them visit. Very important aspect. I'll come to that a bit later. This is a villa which Corbusier has designed in 1906. This was the first project he did when he was a student in 1906. The Corbusier is building the modern architecture, what we see, and his initial buildings, they were completely different. This is a building he designed in 1912. This was one of his independent assignments, which he built the house for his parents. Again, very different. We are not looking at the glass or the concrete or any of those things. He made a trip to East. It has come out as a book, you can buy it on Amazon, Journey to the East. He started his journey in Prague. East means not east of the world, I mean east of Europe. He started his trip in Prague and he traveled for a few months, and his diaries have become as a book about 2 decades ago. I don't remember exactly when it came. You can go through that, where he is looking at how the verandas and the balconies and the materials and the white color of the walls and everything, how it has inspired him to do the buildings. I mean, this was before the so-called modern architecture came, M with a capital. He has written in his diary, it came much later. We can clearly understand, going through the book, we can clearly understand what his thought process was. Because at that time, the kind of architecture which was very prominent was the Art Nouveau or the Victorian kind, very decorative kind. So he questioned, why decoration? Why can't we have a rational building? Why can't we have a simple building? Why can't we build like what the villagers or the rural people do? And this is how he started thinking on those lines, to look at that. And this becomes very, very, but you should read that book, how his thought process. He questioned the architecture which was prevalent. What he came out, we see later in Villa Savoy and many of his projects later. This is Norman Foster. He said, it's important to learn from the past. Lessons of history are important. If we don't learn what has happened in the past, how will we design in the present, which has to be relevant for the future? Your designs has to be relevant for the future also. So you have to learn what has happened in the past. So it's something which should not be neglected. And this is William Morris. As design students, he will know. William Morris has said, I hope that it will be from such necessary, unpretentious buildings that the new and genuine architecture will spring, rather than from experimentation conscious style. This is a quote by William Morris. So we have to look at these things. We should not be neglecting the incredible thing which is not about. What is to be important? It is not to be copied in style. You build a Chettinad style restaurant, you put 2 Chettinad pillars and have some paintings, or you have a 5-star Chinese restaurant, you put some red and black and some artifacts from China, and that is not Chinese architecture. It is copied in style. Tomorrow I go for a conference in US or something, I might wear a suit. It is the same Benny Kuriakose. I change only superficially. My son's wedding reception, I wore the dhoti and the jubba and the very traditional dress. It's same Benny Kuriakose only. It's only style. It's not to be copied on style. It is based on a traditional knowledge system, which unfortunately we don't learn now, because we have been disconnected from it by learning from the Western textbooks. I'm not blindly against the Western textbooks. There is a tree which is used for burning dead bodies. Anybody knows in all over India? Anybody knows? Mango, correct. Which state are you from? UP. Kerala also it's mango. Gujarat also it is mango. Why don't they use neem or tamarind? Tamarind has high calorific value. They don't use tamarind for burning dead bodies. Tamarind is highly preferred by all these traditional fuel people who they used to do, because the calorific value of tamarind timber is very high. When a person dies, you cut the tree and burn. Gujarat, there is a system. They plant a mango tree when a child is born. And when the person dies at the age of 60 or 80, you cut the same mango tree and burn his dead body. What a sensible, eco-friendly concept it is. Why is mango tree used? Why not neem or why not tamarind, which is also available all over? And anybody knows? Can anybody tell an answer? Anybody here? Why is mango tree? If mango tree is used, which is the alternative? When Rajiv Gandhi fire was burnt, or Indira Gandhi, etc., Jayalalitha sent this timber from Tamil Nadu. Not teak. Teak is also available all over. It is another one. Sandalwood. Sandalwood burns when it is because of the oil content in it. Mango has a resin in it, which makes mango burn when it is freshly cut. Otherwise, a freshly cut timber will never burn because 2/3 of it is water. You have to dry the timber. But mango timber will burn when it is freshly cut. And our ancestors knew it. And this is a knowledge which has been transferred from generation to generation. But we don't know the answer. We blindly still, you're happy that you said it from UP, you said that mangoes. It's all over India. Mango tree is used. Kerala, mango tree. You go and ask your grandparents, they will know that mango tree is used for burning dead bodies. So this is traditional knowledge system. Why should we destroy this traditional knowledge system? Why don't we add it to the modern science and technology, which is quite a bit based on the Western technology? Why don't we combine it and then try to do? This is why the style is, architecture and design is not style. It has to do with ethics, it has to do with integrity, and its design is very, very important. It has to do even with equity. And this aspect is very important. I don't know how many of you have heard about Bernard Rudowski. Have you heard about Bernard Rudowski? I've just given. In 1964, he's an architect from Poland, but lived in US. He's carried an exhibition in Metropolitan Museum. Metropolitan, I'm not sure. I think it's the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And this is the catalog of that book, exhibition, Architecture Without Architects. The exhibition talked about the vernacular architecture across the world. He researched and did that exhibition. And it came out as a catalog. It's still available. You will find it in Amazon, mostly with pictures, except few text in the first few pages. He's the one who talked about it first, and he named it Architecture Without Architects, which is good. Now, what is this architecture without architects or vernacular architecture? One is high craftsmanship and quality, which you can see in our temples. There is no ornamentation except wherever it is required. There is no piece which you find purely for ornamentation. Now you will find that some of the buildings you will find columns which go 3 stories and 4 story high, which have no purpose, no functional, no requirement, but it is there for the ornamentation. This is very different. This is something which is wrong. And local materials. They are using local materials. They fit in with the local climate. They are human in scale. People are comfortable and doesn't go through the fashion cycles. That is why you pay $1,000 to go and stay in a hut, in a resort. And they are ecologically more apt. They do minimum damage to the environment. My question is now, does it become sacred when an architect or a designer builds in a traditional way? If architects builds a house in earth, using earth or mud, it is featured in an architectural magazine, where thousands of villagers are building it with every day. So are you going to do that, or do we interpret this knowledge system and then try to design something? What we as an office, is not copying in style. We try to interpret and use it in our designs, and that's what we are trying to do. Using the principles, looking at the sustainability issues in a whole thing, and that becomes important. So this is what we do as an office. Now let me come to the repairs and maintenance issue, why it is important in terms of sustainability. I would like to tell what durability is. None of the building materials increase in strength over a period of time. But if you ask me how many years a building is designed, doesn't have a time frame. You will see hundreds and thousands or 10,000s of lakhs of mud buildings which are more than 100 years old. I grew up in a mud building, 2-story, still there, which my father still owns it. There are hundreds and thousands and lakhs of mud buildings which you can see. There is no time factor built into the design of a building. You don't design a building for 50 years, don't design a building for 25 years. Now, Pakranangal Dam was designed for 88 years or so. In a design of a dam, time factor is there. You take siltation rate into account. Due to the deforestation and the soil erosion, everything happens, which they call it siltation rate. They say a dam will have to be decommissioned after 88 years, 90 years, 100 years. They design for it. But there is no time factor in buildings. The durability of a building is dependent on 2 factors. One is design details and the other is workmanship. I will try to explain both these aspects. Durability of workmanship, durability of a building is dependent on 2 factors. One is workmanship and the other is the design details. There is no time factor in the buildings, which is happening. Look at this building. This, what you see on the right is the house where I grew up as a child. It's a lime plastered building with mud walls and lime plaster. Very little overhang. Somewhere when I was very young, my father added that ventilator using cements. That's why you see the color change. And this is the compound wall of my house, which is now more than 100 years old. You have a traditional detailing calling coping. It's called coping in architectural language. You look at this building next door. The building would have been 15 years old. And under the sunshade, the plastering looks fine. And the painting also looks fine. Here, under this sunshade, it looks fine. But where the coping is absent, when the roof overhang is absent, fully cracked, you get all this moss and lichen growth and everything. Coping is a design detail. All our traditional buildings has multiple design detailing which is there. Look at many of the furniture design. Traditionally, we have so many of the design details which if we don't tell you, then people don't understand it. This is a design detail which has been passed on from generation to generation. Design details adds to the durability of buildings, which is something one has to look into it. So here you can see the cracks will come, slowly water will enter, the plasters will flake off. When I was a student, people believed that concrete buildings will last forever. I did my master's from York University in UK. There were 2 books in our life. It was the topmost course in conservation at that time. We had students from 14 countries, including US and Canada. It was supposed to be the best course on conservation. And our library was supposed to be the best on conservation. We had 2 books on concrete repairs. Now my library in my office has more than 10 books on concrete repairs. 50 years ago, people thought that concrete will last forever. Now, nobody will think it will last for, I ask in all my lectures, I ask how many years it will last. Some people will say 25 years, 30 years, 50 years, but nobody tells more than 75 years. This is very important. A building with bad workmanship is not durable. If the workmanship is not good, the concrete roof will start leaking. You would have put the same reinforcement, same cement, everything would have been correct. But the workmanship is bad. The plastering workmanship is not good. The plastering will flake off after some time. It happens in 10 years. So workmanship is very important. And that is why the concrete buildings, many of the concrete buildings built few years ago needs this. Now, why is the workmanship coming down? Because the manual labor is no longer respected. If you want to get good workmanship, you can't just sit in an office and get it. You have to follow a process of making the craftsman proud of it. One major problem, a mason at the end of the day gets how many bricks he has laid, know how he has laid. The clients or the house owners also wants to pay like, somebody has paid 1,000 bricks, contractor, oh, you have done a good job. Because a mason is, after so many studies, a mason on average will lay about 500 bricks in a day. So if there are masons who lay 1,200 bricks, 1,500 bricks in a day, which is, the quality has to suffer. And you go to a site and tell them this is not correct, they will say, sir, everything will be covered in plaster. Brickwork is bad, you tell them, sorry, we are going to cover everything in plaster. If you say the plastering is bad, sir, Birla Putty is there, we will cover everything in putty and give you a 5-star hotel finish, they will say. So this is the way things look at. It's not. This is Hassan Fathy wrote in his book, Architecture for the Poor. A craftsman never talks about architecture, he creates it. This is not only true for architecture. A potter, he creates beautiful designs. He doesn't talk about it. Only we talk about it, which is very, very important. A craftsman understands the technology of his craft. He knows how to do it. He knows the science behind it. He might not be able to give you calculations and things, but he knows if you do this, this is not going to happen. But the way the construction industry got changed, where labor contract and overtime led to decrease in quality. The moment the quantity becomes important and the quality takes a backseat, you are getting affected. It's the same, the mass production or any of these things, this is a serious issue. There is no shortcut to good craftsmanship. And present day construction is quite a bit relying on construction chemicals. Even the clients are not demanding. If the clients don't demand it, how will they will give? So the way we organize, we try to ensure that the quality of workmanship is good. If the buildings last for a longer period of time and it has lesser repairs, it will lead to sustainability. Very clearly. So don't look at the initial cost that you are spending. So you might do something, you might spend a little bit more, but if you look at a building which lasts for 25 years, and you look at a building, you spend 25% more on a building which lasts for 75 years, I will choose the 75 years as more sustainable. Time as a fourth dimension has to come into design, which is very, very important aspect. If buildings are lasting only for 25 years, we will never be achieving sustainability. There are so many buildings which are demolished down in 25 years. There is a shopping mall in Chennai. Nobody goes to that place, nobody wants to shop there. But 25 years ago, it was the prime shopping place. Buildings are becoming obsolete. 25% of the shopping malls in US are closed even before the corona lockdown happened. 25%. It might be 23, 22, but definitely more than 20%. And more are being closed because of the online business. It's not the initial cost. It is the money that you spend on the building has to be taken into account. I'm just giving, these are research studies. One is that 1/3 of the output of the construction and building industry is for the maintenance of buildings. We are spending a lot of money on maintenance of buildings, which is quite high. So if we do design details, if we ensure the quality of workmanship, and if we can ensure that the buildings are more durable, I'm not talking about anything about is equally applicable to a mobile phone or many of these things, which is equally applicable. And there's one more thing you designers should know. 1/5 of the total cost of repairs is spent on the rectification of defects arising from errors in design or construction. One of the biggest advantages is that the mistakes which designers make, the clients also don't know about it, whether it's in buildings or any. Once in a while you will find that the Ford company decided to withdraw all their batteries, or Apple decided to, I had received a notice, if you have bought the laptop at this time, we would like, please bring it to our showroom, we'll replace it and give. Nothing, no problem with my laptop, but they give a notice and then do. Some companies might keep some ethics kind of thing. So this is a very, very important aspect. And one of the major reasons was students and engineers and professionals. We have a great professional ignorance on these materials, which is happening. Say earth or timber, we use a lot of timber in our buildings. And we are not taught about timber in the colleges, which is very unfortunate, which is happening. And we need to have a major shift in our thinking in how to do it. The way the design is done will change drastically if we think that minimum repairs to the building is to happen. Minimum repairs is very, very important. I've designed Seema's father's house almost 38 years ago. It's in my website. You can just go and see it. It still looks, I photographed that building 2 years ago or 1 year ago. I just don't know. I put it in my website. Did it in 86, 87, 87, and it's still in extremely good condition. So it's a simple thing. The way you look at design will change drastically. We will add these design details. I'm talking about one, there are multiple things about this thing. So our objective should be to have minimum repairs to the building. It's a very, very important aspect of a design method which we use. Third is the conservation of buildings. This is converted into a museum. I'll quickly run through it. Strengthen the building because the residence was converted. It is the official residence of the Cochin Prime Minister, which has been, it's a public building now, converted into a museum. So I'm just showing before and after. About 50% of practice is conservation of buildings because you are recycling, reusing the whole building. This is a synagogue which we did. And this is a photograph I took before I took over the project. So what you see that this is a heikel, they call it. All the chandeliers were there. I took this photograph in 2007, I think, 2007 or 8. Then it was under a private occupation. Some encroachment was there. By the time we removed the encroachment, got it back, the building was vacant. Government took over the building. All these chandeliers are chosen by a thief. And unfortunately or fortunately, the thief did not know the antique value of the chandeliers. Each of the chandeliers will be running into few lakhs or 20 lakhs, 25, because they are all antique Belgium chandeliers. What the thief did was, he broken all the glass, and he took the brass and sold it for scrap value. Because that is what he could do. And this is what has happened. And this is an older photograph of the same synagogue. This is also a public building now. It has been converted into a museum, and you can see the original heikel which is there. So we found, and what we got was this. There's some bathroom tiles have been put, and our inquiry started. Where is the heikel? Just found out. Our inquiry led to this place in Israel. This is from Jerusalem Museum. Just like a Kohinoor diamond or the peacock throne, everything is sitting in other countries. If you, Chennai Egmore Museum has a beautiful collection of Amaravati Buddhist sculptures, but they are the leftovers which the British could not take to the British Museum. The best treasures are outside. This one. So this is now sitting there with the thing. So wrote to the museum and got these sketches. When they dismantled it, this is the sketch. You can see 5.37 meters with the Hebrew letters. Using the photographs, we drew it. One person in my office spent 3 months drawing it, looking at the photographs, and evening everybody will say, no, this is not correct. No, you have drawn only 4 grapes. If there are 6 grapes, look at this. And then we will come to a conclusion. It's 18 feet high. So the drawing was made and the craftsmen started crafting it. And if you go to the museum now, you can see a replica of the one which is there in Jerusalem. So what I just want to try, what kind of work, and this is an overall photograph of this thing. Another photograph. This is a connecting corridor. And we just do one. This is one of the projects which we worked. Oldest mosque. The photograph looked like this with a water body. No water body nearby now. The mosque website says 7th century, but definitely the oldest mosque in India. This is a report which appeared in Hindu. 1,400 years mosque to be restored its original. And this is the state of the photographs when we got the project. This was one of the other old photographs taken at the turn of the century, last century. So we got this photograph. And this was a photograph of the same building which I took in 1984. So at that time, only the minarets and domes and some concrete, and then you have all the truss sheets and everything which has been added. So this happened. So the capacity will come down from 2,000 to 300, and we made a kind of 3D and all those things. We made multiple proposals, not going into the details, this one, and the mosque, they started demolishing it. This is relevant because very many of the cases where the traditional structures are, where they add minarets and domes to many of the traditional structures, they are demolishing and bringing it back to the old thing. And this is what you see. And if you go there now, you see a mosque which is similar to the photographing. Well, all this requires a lot of studies and research and everything. And this is another photograph. The visitors to the mosque has increased drastically. So many people are coming from various places. And this is the inside. There is a lamp also there, which is very, very important to do this. Alappuzha, we worked on a project. I'm trying to give the diverse this projects. This was the state of the Alappuzha canals, which is called the Venice of the East. We get. You cannot call them as canals, they are drains actually. All the hotel waste, household waste is falling into that, full of all rubbish. And there are so many sub-canals leading to that. So we, started working on that even, because if you don't repair the smaller canals, the bigger canals cannot be kept clean. So this one. And massive work, cleaning up, some retaining walls has to be built. The water has been brought clean. People have started fishing again. I have not put one photograph, I have put multiple photographs to see that it is not it. It was a very heartening thing to see. People started doing fishing there and people started swimming. The water is still not clean, but people started jumping into the canals and started swimming, which is happening. And this is a drone shot taken. You can see the canal side is still not done. We are building a cycling track and pedestrian track along the sides of the canal. But all these people who are interested in this is trying to get involved. This is a drone shot which was taken. I don't know whether it will work. This is a small video. Even if the sound is not coming, you can just see, you look at the sides of the canal, not yet done. The work has been tendered. I think the contractor is in place. But you can see how people will own a place when you bring it public space. No inauguration, no government function, nothing. It's the social media or the people said we will use the canal on such and such date. And there were drums and everything. People are so excited on the side of the canals, which is happening in this kayaking and all those things. You know how filthy the canals were few months ago, and it has been cleaned, and it has to be maintained by the people. Reusing an existing building is the greenest thing which you can do, because you are recycling the whole building. It is much better than the platinum rated building, or whatever grade or whatever you want to call it, and it conserves energy, conserves materials and everything which is happening, and uses less amount of material. Conservation projects uses 40% less amount of materials, which means it's more of a sustainable step that you do as part of it. And it will give employment because it's more labor intensive, and that is what happened. So even if whatever the green, the platinum rated building, if we can conserve a building, that is the most sustainable thing which you can do. Timber as a building material. With my last point, beautiful buildings. This is the Palpanapuram Palace, and this is right on the Trivandrum city near the Palpanapa Swami temple, which is one of the wealthiest temples in the world now. You can see timber walls. This is the exterior shot. Now I'm going to show how interior this looks like this. These are 200, 300-year-old building. This one is the exterior, and this building is almost 200 years old, and this is how it looks inside. Even bamboo. Tamil Nadu, you can see it. This building is more than 100 years. They use bamboo for constructing the buildings. And there is a lot of things which is there. I just try to quickly. One is the techniques of doing the buildings. This is all the rafters get crowded at the top in this. This is the way you construct bamboo buildings. And you can find some buildings like this, where each of the rafters are of different lengths. The present way of doing is like this. There are smaller rafters, hip rafters, principal rafter. I'm not going into the detail. If you see a building like this, you can say it is at least 200 years old, which is there. And the technology, the technique, the materials. I can elaborately talk about the different timber species. For each purpose, you have to use a different timber species. For example, to know the cart of a bullock cart is made of 4 species of timber. The outer rim needs to get this. The purpose or the function of the outer rim is different from where the axle is coming and the abrasion is happening. They are the purpose. No timber has a universal timber. Each timber has its own purpose. Mango tree is used for burning dead bodies because of that. So each timber needs a purpose, needs thing, and that's how we have been using many of these timbers. And this is a circular building. This master craftsman works with me. He's a little bit older than me, and he sends me photographs. He is the one who restored that Juma Masjid, the oldest mosque. He works with us on other projects as well. They still do these techniques. You give enough work to the craftsmen, they will do wonders. The thing is, I asked him, are you transferring it to your son? He said, I'm transferring it to my son. Unfortunately, we don't have any institutes or colleges where we transfer the indigenous knowledge, which is very, very important to do this. We have extensively studied the timber joinery because we have to do a lot of these buildings. How the wall plates are joined. I'm just showing some of the things, how the rafters are joined to the wall plates. And we have done, this building, except that front wall, very little masonry used in this building. Floor is timber, walls are timber, except that masonry wall you see. The roof is timber. I can see the walls also mostly made with timber. But this is in a hill station, that's why I'm used a little bit more of the glass. Reason for it. The ceiling of that house. This is another building which has come up in another coffee estate. The previous one is also in a coffee estate. This is a building which is in the city. using timber rafters. This is a building which is there. I mean, the traditional Chettinad tiles or Athangudi tiles, which doesn't use any firing or need even 1 unit of electricity to make the tiles. Handmade tiles are used for the flooring. See how reflecting it looks. This is a restaurant we did, which is there. I mean, this is a building which we have conserved. Timber as a building material. The only thing which can reverse climate change is timber. Trees are the only things which can absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and convert into oxygen. So if you grow more and more trees, we will be able to reverse the climate change. All other steps we talk about climate change or green buildings or sustainable architecture is only going to slow down the process. You might have an AC which uses so much units of power. There might be something which uses a 25 unit less power. It's not going to reverse. It's only going to slow down the process as a whole. But when you use timber in buildings, you are locking the carbon, which is happening. Because when you use timber in a building, carbon is never emitted out. You have learned the carbon cycle in school. If you burn the timber, carbon dioxide is emitted. You allow the timber to decay, carbon dioxide is emitted. The only hope that we have is to use more and more timber in our buildings, because you are not releasing the carbon dioxide. You are locking the timber in this thing. Carbon gets locked in timber, and you need not use teak or anything. There are a lot of these things. I mean, cross-laminated timber, which is very much used abroad. 2015, I myself went and saw few multi-storied buildings made out of timber in London city itself. So there they are experimenting on this, and this building is opened, 24 stories, 85% is built with timber, exterior is timber, floor is timber, frame is timber. What that 15% is some glass and some sanitary fixtures, which is not used. Otherwise, 85% of the material is timber, and it's a ho-ho tower. You can just Google and find out. The building is open. Now another multi-storied, which is taller than this, is coming up. So it might come up in the next 2-3 years. Satellite townships are being planned with timber as a thing. So timber is the future building material. I always say, if we are going to solve the 60 million families, there are 55-60 million families in India without a house. When I passed out in 1984, it was 25 million. The numbers have increased in spite of the development, in spite of the so many architects and engineers passing out. And we have all made all promises. Roti, kapada or makan is a slogan which I heard in the 70s when I was young. Roti and kapada we have solved, but makan is still a huge issue, which is very difficult. We don't have cement to construct a 60 million houses. We don't even have earth to build 60 million houses, because it is degrading the environment. When we say built environment, we talk only about the environment man has made. We don't talk about the built environment by other animals. Termites have their termite built environment is there. Beaver built environment. There are so many other things we talk. We talk only about we are so selfish when we talk about only us. And the nature is going to give us back without any doubt. The nature is taking a revenge on all of us. The only thing here is that pollution was a problem in the West in the 70s. They shifted many of the industries to third world countries. And now the production happens in third world countries, and there is pollution in the third world countries. European cities are much cleaner. If you look at some of the most polluted cities, you'll find Delhi, Mumbai, Kanpur, etc. in the list. And Delhi, even colleges have been closed. Today's newspaper says colleges. So but pollution is something which the West can divert it to the third world countries. But climate change and global warming is something which is going to affect them as well. So it is a serious problem. So we have to look at it. I am of the opinion that timber will be the solution for the housing problem in India. I made some rough calculations. You need 5 or 6 coconut trees for solving the housing problem, for building a small house, coconut trees. And Kerala has about 5. The number of coconut trees in Kerala is more than the population there. Because every household has 3 or 4 coconut trees. So if you have only 5 or 6 coconut trees is all that you require to build a small house. You cut the coconut trees will yield only for 80 to 100 years. You cut the tree, use it. Similarly, we have to look at some problems. It is only the bio-based will be the solution to the sustainability issues. Not the fossil fuel or not any of the. A lot of research is happening in the West based on these things. How to use the bio-based products for human consumption. And unfortunately, the profession did not look at many of these things. And for the people without a house, climate change doesn't mean anything to them. For them, it is the food which is more important. Hunger has not been solved. And if any of you think the hunger problem, roti, kapada, I said when I said there are still people who doesn't get food for 3 meals a day. That is why our Indian Prime Minister went to the first UN conference in Stockholm and she told the Western world, Indira Gandhi told the Western world that poverty is the greatest pollution. When the West was talking about pollution. Just now the climate change, the West is so keen. They are not keeping their promises. I read a newspaper yesterday that India government is asking for so much money to be compensated by the developed countries. So all these things are happening which we have to look. We have to look at our way of designing as a solution. We need to reinterpret the vernacular architecture, make use of the 21st century know-how, learning, technology, systems and all those things in place. If we don't reinterpret and try to, I'm not saying that it should be blindly followed. That's why I said all these 4 principles which I said is linked with vernacularism. That is why I'm saying unless we look at sustainable vernacularism, there is no solution. It has to be a bio-based one. It has to be something where timber or some of those materials which can be reused and recycled should become prominent. We should use the knowledge which you have gained over so many years should be used. And we should recycle the buildings which has to come, which means it's not just the concrete buildings. Our building stock is mostly consisting of mud and thatch and timber. Don't take an attitude that everything modern or is good. Unfortunately, will happen. It's not a question of modernity or tradition. It's not a question of vernacular architecture or modern architecture. It's a question of survival of the human beings. And if we don't address it now, it will be too late by the time we address very clearly. And this is again Hassan Fathi's statement. There must be neither fake tradition nor fake modernity, but an architecture that will be visible and permanent expression of the character of a community. Of course, we would like to stand out as a practice that we are not copying it as a style. We try to research on various aspects and we look into it. And why sustainable vernacularism? This is not rooted in modern architecture. You need not believe in modern architecture to practice sustainable vernacularism. And I'm also saying that everything vernacular is sustainable. I don't have a thing. For example, stone. I used to make so many buildings with stone, but now I stopped doing it because, you see landslides, quarries is a major cause of the problem. So why do you want to add it? So we have stopped building in large quantities with stone, even if it is a local material. Laterite is a problem. My house was built, my father built a house in 1968 using laterite. We cut the laterite from the house compound itself. When I was a child, I used to see a pit. The house was built in 1968 where my father and mother still stays. And the pit where the laterite block was cut from the same location, hand cut. We used to dump all the waste. Now you don't see the pit at all. Because 40 years or 50 years of waste dumping, kitchen waste, all the waste dumping has filled up that place. And that land is reusable with a lot of trees. And that is a very, very eco-friendly way of building. But when you build with a quarry, when a laterite becomes a quarry item, you have to think. So the source of the material has to be thought. How is the timber coming from? Is it coming with child labor from a country called Benin or Ghana or Nigeria or Costa Rica where teak is imported? Is women exploited in those locations? We have to think about it. But unfortunately, we don't have the information. I'll tell you a real incident which has happened. Gandhiji has come to Kerala 5 times. We are in the process of designing a Gandhiji museum in Kerala. That will be the 14th Gandhi museum in the country. So we did some research, and Gandhiji came to Kerala and attended. One of his friends took him to a housewarming ceremony. So in the housewarming ceremony, the carpenters were praying and did a puja and then hand over to the family. This is normally the system which is everywhere. So the carpenters were telling certain Sanskrit slokas. Gandhiji, being very curious, Gandhiji called the house owner and asked him, what is the meaning of these? The carpenters saying these things. The house owner, many of the Sanskrit slokas which the pujaris come and recite during a ceremony, wedding ceremony or marriage or a death ceremony, you don't know the meaning. So Gandhiji wanted to know. So Gandhiji, the house owner also didn't know, called the carpenters, asked them to do. The house owner translated it for Gandhiji. What the carpenters were praying, in the midst of making an abode for a human being, we have cut down so many trees. Please forgive us, God, for the wrong things we have done. We have destroyed so many abodes of the insects and birds and all those living beings. Please forgive us, God. And this is a principle which the carpenters used to say it in a prayer. If all designers think on these lines, then we'll have a very good future to follow very clearly to learn. In sustainable vernacularism, there is no modernity. There is no compromise between modernity and tradition. This is what the critical regionalism, I don't want to go into the things, some of the people, there is a movement called critical regionalism who try to say that modern architecture should be reflecting the context in which you are building. But sustainable vernacularism is not looking at that. There is no compromise. It's critical regionalism, a compromise with modern architecture. But what I am talking about, there is no compromise with the modern architecture. And some of the 3 pioneers, Fatih, Baker and Jeffrey Baba, Hassan Fatih, Laurie Baker and Jeffrey Baba, they questioned the international style of architecture. They never made any claims that doing it according to regionalism. They did not accept, they were accepting the most mainstream architecture. They were questioning the mainstream architecture when they practiced. Local climate, materials, techniques and context were taken into account in their designs, and they experimented with many vernacular elements which happen. And but only 2 more slides. The world has enough for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. And if you look at this statement, it will give you answers to many of the problems that we are facing. So this is a serious issue. And what we need is not an international sustainable architecture. We need to look at that. What we are trying to do is good architecture, and we don't want to do bad architecture. We are not into styling. We are not into vernacular. Although many people think that we are into styling. We are not into styling. We study the projects and we try to bring this. For us, sustainability is very keen in the future. And what I tried to do, I hope I might have taken 1 hour. What I tried to do, more than an hour might be, what I tried to do is how our design philosophy and design approach is done. Thank you.